are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show.
Welcome to the Evolve to Win show. I'm Heather.
And I'm Paul.
And today we have with us a very special guest, Lieutenant Colonel Al Mategrano. Although I should say retired Lieutenant Colonel. Welcome, Al.
Thanks, Heather, Paul. I've been retired for 3.5 years now.
Well, we'll always think of you as Lieutenant Colonel. Now, what's interesting about this guest, would you like to share?
Yeah, so Al Mategrano is one of my really great friends. We've been friends for a long, long time. And a quick little funny story is, I remember the day because
look at his face. He's like, I don't know what he's gonna tell.
I remember.
We're not supposed to tell stories, Paul.
When he was accepted to West Point, and I was over at his house, and it was only maybe a month before he was leaving, and he had bought his combat boots, and he was out.
Matthew, excuse me for just a minute. I need to be. Sorry, Matt just popped down here for a second. I got the kids running around home from school, you know.
It's all right. And so he has these combat boots, and he puts them on, and he goes out and starts training because he knows he's going to boot camp soon. And he's running down the street with them. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, I can't believe he's actually going to leave us at 17 years old and go to West Point. What a cool thing. Like, I'd never even really heard of West Point other than the Army-Navy game. And didn't know much about, what it was all about other than it was Army. And I just have that vision of him just running down the street with his boots on. Oh, and that's how it all started. And then after that, we kind of lost touch because he just was so busy with his career and everything else. But now we have him back, and I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah, so I didn't know much more about West Point than you guys did at the time either. I was really a babe in the woods. I didn't come from a family with a deep military heritage, and how I got accepted and went to West Point is kind of a long story in and of itself. But suffice to say that I did go. Paul and I, like you said, we've been friends for like 35 years. No kidding.
Yeah.
We go back to the beginning of middle school, I think. And although I did go away and I went to West Point, and then I got commissioned, and I served on active duty for 23 years. I was an engineer officer. I got stationed all over the planet. I was in Asia, and I was in South America, all throughout the United States, and in Europe for many years, and in the Middle East for a number of tours. In my military career, I did a lot of different things as well, right? So I had the opportunity as an engineer officer to do everything from combat engineering. I was a paratrooper for 7 years at Fort Bragg. I did construction. I did utilities and public works. I did geospatial engineering. And so engineer officers have a unique branch within the Army that we have so much diversity available to us. And I tried to take advantage of all of it. And it kind of gave me a broad background
and for us,
of experiences.
For us mere civilians, we actually work with some clients in engineering firms, civil engineering firms, but can you distinguish for us, what does an engineer officer do exactly? So you've held so many different positions, but what does it look like? So you said at one point you're a paratrooper. Were you as an engineer officer also acting as a paratrooper at the time?
Yeah. So the time I was stationed at Fort Bragg, I was in a combat engineer unit, and we were an airborne unit, meaning that how we deployed somewhere was to get on a plane, put a parachute on our back, jump out of a plane with ourselves and our equipment, And that's how we got to where we were going. And then we performed combat engineering tasks in support of maneuver, in support of offense and defense.
Okay, so I've jumped out of a plane once. You've jumped out of a plane once.
Kissed the ground and was like, I'll never do that
And
again.
that was a once in a lifetime experience in my book. How many times have you jumped out of a plane?
I have about 35 jumps, which really isn't that many considering how long I was on jump status. It's just that when I was at Fort Bragg, it was from 2005 to 2012. But I spent every other year when I was at Fort Bragg either in Iraq or Afghanistan. And so, I arrived at Fort Bragg at the end of 2005. And the beginning of 2006, I deployed to Afghanistan for a year. Came back in 2007. 2008, I deployed to Iraq again for another year. Came back in 2009. And then in at the beginning of 2011, the whole calendar year of 2011, I was in Iraq again and then came back. So I didn't have as much time.
You spent 2 years in Iraq in a combat zone too, didn't you?
Yeah, those were the 2 years that I spent in Iraq. I was either in Baghdad or Basra for a total of 24 months over 2 separate tours.
Wow. Well, we want to hear so much about this. And Al, this show is really about helping people to really achieve, to lead through the growth environment that we're in right now. We're in the fastest paced business environment anyone's ever seen. And we know that your ability to lead in times of change is just absolutely critical to success. So one of the things we want to really focus on with you is some of the leadership lessons that you learned over your years. And, if you could, tell us maybe a story about one of your better leadership mentors. Do you have somebody who in your world you really looked up to?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the kind of principles of leadership, one of the foundations of leadership skills is building your team. And I think that is something that you're constantly have to be striving to, is to make your team, whether that's a team of 2 or a team of 20,000, better. It's a core competency of being a leader. When I arrived in Hawaii, which is one of the places I was stationed, Captain Mategrano at the time, I had a mentor. He was my battalion commander. His name was Lieutenant Colonel John Luce. And he was just an exceptional leader. And it was interesting because the unit I was in was we just got done talking about jumping out of airplanes with explosives and guns. Captain Mategrano, however, was in Hawaii, and I had a topographic company under my command, which means I had a company of map makers. Okay, so they were surveyors and map makers, and we were in Hawaii amongst the 25th Infantry Division, some of the hardest core light fighting infantrymen that our Army has, all right? So we had a challenge. My battalion commander and I, as a company commander, we had a challenge because my company, the men and women of my company, felt and convinced themselves that they were inferior to the men of the 25th Infantry Division. We had completely different missions. We were stationed in a different location than the infantry division that we were supporting. And my battalion commander challenged me to figure out a way to raise the game of my company, right? So to make them think of themselves but be better and to be better. And, I kind of took his challenge to me and passed that along to my company and really came away. And you learn this along the way. So I didn't know this going in, but being through it, I kind of think of it as a series of steps now to team building. And I think it begins with a challenge. And so I would challenge my company to do things that they hadn't done before, right? Participate in events that are head-to-head with the infantry units of 25th Infantry Division.
So you actually put your team up against their team,
yeah,
to do different events.
Yeah, and because they never would have done it on their own. And believe it or not, they would actually do relatively well. All things considered. But that challenging of your organization leads to small successes. And every one of those small successes then builds confidence in every one of those individuals, that it builds confidence together as an organization. It becomes a more confident culture within that organization. And confident units, confident organization, confident teams will then take more initiative. And so they start doing more things on their own because they feel like they can. And units, organizations, teams that take initiative become efficient because they're not always waiting around for somebody to tell them exactly what to do. And so what I learned by being challenged myself by, a really, really experienced mentor was that you can improve your team, you can build your team by introducing challenges, leading to successes, resulting in confidence that create initiatives and ultimately leads to a more efficient, basically a better type of team or organization. Mm-hmm. And once you get through that cycle, you repeat it, right? And then they can achieve greater challenges. And before you know it, over time, you've got a company that or a unit, whatever, that knows it's not taking a back seat to anybody else, right? They have now, and that culture permeates. So even when I leave, that culture can remain behind and somebody else takes over for me, because in the military, you never do anything longer than 12, 18, 24 months. That culture can remain and hopefully promulgates itself.
Yeah, so you had mentioned too about sometimes having to manufacture challenges, right? So what did that look like? And give us an example of that.
Yeah, so
because I think this is important, and I know we talked prior to this podcast just about how this could apply to just the civilian world. How does it apply to corporate? The military has a system and structure that has been in place for a long time. It's run by rules and regulations. Corporate America is a little bit different. And so how would you apply that?
Well, I think, that's part of the skill of being a leader, right? So, in leadership, you can learn through training and you can learn through experience, but really to learn the art of it, you have to have both. And it doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. You have to start grooming leaders as early as possible so that they really, for the first several years, do nothing but make mistakes and try to observe other leaders who are gone through that already and are doing things right.
So I just want to stop there for a second because I think that's really, really awesome. The idea, the concept of, first of all, starting young and grooming leaders. I mean, that it should be a given, but it's not always a given especially in the private sector. But you're grooming them to get them to fail, to make mistakes over and over, because that's how someone grows. That's how someone learns.
Yeah. Cool. And if you're, I think that the norm should be is that the senior leaders, the mentors, have to underwrite those mistakes. They have to have factored those mistakes into their bottom line going into it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? I mean, you have, take it, whatever, branch chiefs or squad leaders or platoon leaders, whatever you want to talk about, in the military or in the corporate environment, who have their legs cut out when they make a mistake, and then they're just never given an opportunity after that. And that's completely the wrong approach, in my opinion, because there's no way to really develop a leader, right? You want leaders who have to be your executives, right, in 20 years from now, that have gone through being a team leader, being a supervisor, being a manager. And to expect that guy to be perfect, first of all, it's just too much pressure, and it's unrealistic. And I think expecting perfection and not underwriting mistakes and failure can lead also to some ethical problems, because those leaders then will begin doing things that they wouldn't normally do if they weren't under so much pressure, right? They could start cutting corners. They could start being disingenuous, things that challenge their own ethics and their own morals. And I personally think I had a lot of great leaders growing up in the Army. I think most of them in the military are. I mean, there is some toxic leadership that's for certain that's out there. But in general, I think the military is one of the, if not the best leadership development factories really anywhere.
So when you talk about not having the expectation of perfection for someone, whether it's for one of your soldiers, whether in the private sector, one of your leaders, and I think about, we already have this epidemic really, where so many of our clients expect perfection from themselves, right? So we have these internal drive for perfection. And when you think about coupling that with having one of your superiors have those kind of expectations for you, it really is, it causes a lot of internal stress and absolutely can pull people the wrong way. So it makes a lot of sense. Now,
I think so. And, I think there's a difference between having a goal of perfection and instead always striving for improvement and really measuring yourself and measuring others, be it people that your team or just others around you, against a gold standard, as opposed to measuring them against where they've been and where they are now. I think incremental improvement across all aspects of a system, right? Whatever that system is, be it an individual, be it an organization, really small improvements in all different areas is what a leader is responsible for. And I mean, the interesting thing is that if you make these small incremental improvements across all areas, eventually those things, just like putting money in the bank, it compounds, right? It generates interest, and before you know it, you're rich and awesome.
And who doesn't want to be rich and awesome?
Right. And the funny thing is that it really isn't that hard. It's just a series of positive changes over time, right? But that's the rub, right? You have to be in an environment where patience is part of the plan.
Well, and we're such an instant gratification society.
More than ever now.
Yeah. With things moving as quickly as they are and technology going as quickly. I think that's definitely an area of struggle, and you're so right. Just keep just the incremental improvement. So I'm thinking incremental improvement over perfection is your message that you're sending. And it applies to every area of life, every area of business. It's the little things that always add up. So, Al, can you share with us a story? I'm sure you've dealt with your leadership challenges over the years. Do you have any good stories for us? Something that really challenged you as a leader?
Yeah. So I was thinking about some, I don't know, funny stories, some good stories, but I think I got a couple of things that may help to make a point, right? So we talked about what I think is foundational leadership principles, and then the art of leadership, and how things can be learned both kind of in an institutional setting and what can only be learned through experience. I think one of the hardest things to learn that takes time over experience is how to find the right balance of being a leader, of focusing either on the here and now or focusing on the future, and also focusing on the individual or the organization.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time time being a leader to find out where on those sliding scales you need to be given a certain set of circumstances, given a certain environment, giving a certain position. So, Second Lieutenant Mategrano, this makes it either 1991 to 1993. I can't tell you when. It's probably like 1992. Stationed at Fort Rucker, Alabama, after growing up in Chicago and going to school in New York, kind of a fish out of water, doing the best I can. A platoon leader of a heavy equipment platoon in a combat construction unit. So me and my platoon get deployed to the National Training Center, which is at Fort Irwin, California. And that is where the Army trains and exercises large-scale force-on-force type of operations. It's called the National Training Center. And I was there with my platoon, and our mission was for the day that this story takes place, was to help set the defense. So I'm a combat engineer. I've got things like bulldozers and bucket loaders and backhoes. We are setting the defense. So we're building obstacles, and we're building fighting positions, and we're digging fighting positions, and we're doing that all day in support of a maneuver task force for the next day's battle that is supposed to be played out. Okay. Out there all day, working. Second Lieutenant Mategrano, I'm everywhere, right? So I'm supervising the digging of a tank ditch. I'm supervising the installation of a wire obstacle. Everything looks perfect. It's great. Up until about 1900, when the sun goes down.
Our time, right?
7 p.m., right? So the sun goes down, the moon is not up, and it is pitch black. Second Lieutenant Mategrano has a map and a compass. You can't turn on your headlights. Second Lieutenant Mategrano is the stereotypical lost lieutenant. I drug my platoon for the next 6 hours around the desert with heavy equipment and tractor trailers and jeeps, trying to find our logistics support area where I was supposed to return. So eventually my boss gave up on me, sent somebody out to find me. I get led back to the LSA, tail between my legs, typical lost lieutenant. So I lost track of the difference between the now and the future, and the individual versus the organization. So I told you the story. It's obvious what I should have been doing is leaving the installation, the building, the digging up to my squad leaders and team leaders. Mm-hmm. I should have been making plans for the next 24 hours. All right. So fast forward to 2000 and I think it was 2006. I was in Afghanistan, Major Mategrano now. I'm in Afghanistan as part of a combat engineer task force called Task Force Eagle. I had the cool call sign of Eagle 3. I was the operations officer for this task force. I got the mission to take one company and a portion of the battalion staff, so probably about 130, 140, on a separate mission down to a place called Tarankot, Afghanistan. I don't recommend it as the place to go visit, vacation. It's in Kandahar province. And our mission was to clear the roads of improvised explosive devices so that we could provide freedom of maneuver, freedom of movement to some special forces units and some provincial reconstruction teams that were down in that southern part of Afghanistan. So I like to think that I kind of learned my lessons, right? And I did to a certain extent, right? So I knew that it was way more important to me to be looking at the next 24, 48 hours of every day that came around than to be making sure that my sappers were clearing the roads of IEDs properly. They knew how to do that. Their lieutenants knew how to do that, and their captain knew how to do that. I needed to make sure that I had the broad perspective of the entire picture of what was going on in the region, that I was coordinating with the provincial reconstruction team and the special forces teams that we were supporting. I needed to be in touch with the local Afghan population so that, you know, our mission came off well, right? So, but it's really easy to get drawn in to the individual and the now, especially in a combat situation, because it's hard to ignore what these, you know, young men and women are doing. And you kind of want to be there with them, and you want to be there to help supervise and protect. And you want to be in the now, right? I mean, but you have to know what your job is at any given time. And so, I mean, it's a long way to get to my point of experience matters. You have to go through these leadership challenges and these leadership failures to learn, so that when it really matters, I mean, there's a reason why they let lieutenants get lost at the National Training Center.
Right.
So that Major Mategrano doesn't get people lost in Kandahar province.
Yeah. The training runs are extremely valuable because Eagle 3 completed his mission, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, would not have wanted you and your team lost in Kandahar.
Yeah, and you think about how, you know, just in general, you know, business owners, people that are in corporate America, they're always being brought into the now. And it's very difficult to strategic think. It's very difficult to build that roadmap of what you need to be doing, not just the next couple of days, but the next month, 2 months, even years, 3 years out.
And Paul, these things make it that much harder because your senior leaders, your corporate senior leaders, they have instant access to every bit of information that happens across their entire organization. And so it's so enticing to do the job of your subordinate leaders because you know exactly what is going on, right? And so there's an art to generalship or executiveship that knows what to look at and when to get involved and when not to. But all of the data that we have at our fingertips today makes it hard to separate yourself from all those situations.
Yeah. So tell us what it was like for you. I think you retired in 2014, you said, right? So what was it like for you to actually retire from active duty? And, you know, you're now with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So you stayed with the Army, but as a civilian now, how does it feel to be a civilian?
It's good, right? So my last assignment was in the Pentagon. You know, that is basically the Army's corporate headquarters. And it just, I was done moving my family. You know, we had moved 12 or 13 times over the course of our career. I had spent 5 of my 23 years away from my family. You know, I had spent 3 of the first 5 years of, you know, my kids' lives away from them. And it just was obvious that it was the right time to retire. And I had an easy transition because I stayed Army, was able to stay in Northern Virginia, and to take up with, you know, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I work at the Army Geospatial Center, and I'm the senior staff officer there. And we do geospatial engineering, which I had a little bit of a background in. And, you know, it's a technical, organization, and we do research and development. So my transition has been great. But, you know, leadership doesn't change. I have a small number of people who actually report to me. And so, you know, I have leadership responsibility for just a handful of folks. But as in my role across the broader organization, I've got leadership responsibilities to help coordinate and synchronize the efforts of all the different divisions and branches within the organization. And that's a different bit of a challenge. And because they don't, you know, leading people who don't actually work for you is in and of itself kind of a specific aspect of leadership. Because they all have their own bosses who are their own raiders. And I'm tasked to help bring kind of a coalition of the willing so that all of these different units work together towards the broader organization goal.
Sounds like a huge need for influence. Right? If people aren't reporting directly to you, how do you get them to move unless you've got their trust, their respect, right?
Yeah, I have to be my charming self, right? You know, and Paul is laughing because that's probably not my natural strong suit.
No. Yeah, we've actually seen your profile, so we know that you're not that warm and fuzzy necessarily, right? But you're a producer. You are a taskmaster, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I looked at it and I figured that some alarm bell went off somewhere when this was produced. I'm on some watch list now based upon the results of this assessment. But you know, let me put it to you this way: I wouldn't have been able to do what I do now 10 years ago. I don't think I had the skills to bring together diverse groups of people who, you know, really don't have to do things the way you want them to do it, and to do it so that people understand why they're doing what it is that they're doing. And quite honestly, everyone is different. That's why you do these leadership assessments with your clients, is so that they understand why I think they are in certain circumstances and in certain situations. I'm exhausted after days of dealing with a large number of people at work, because it's not my natural habitat.
Yes.
My natural habitat is I'm good with numbers. I'm good with things. I'm good with problems. I'm good with algorithms. I wanted to be a pilot. And it took me, 4 years at, West Point and 23 years of doing all different things in the Army to finally be able to go to work for 8 hours and deal with people.
Congratulations, you graduated, right?
Congratulations. I finally graduated to being able to deal with people.
And that's
really
just a whole different energy level for you. Yeah.
That's right. It does. I really have to steel myself sometimes to do all that. And for me, it's exhausting. And I think that maybe by looking at my assessment, you would see how and why that is. Mm-hmm. And for your clients, you point that out to them and say, hey, yeah, it's understandable that somebody like you would feel that way.
Yes.
And, maybe you want to consider that when you're talking about your career, what you might want to do next. Mm-hmm. Because, I tell my wife every time we go to a party, small talk confuses me. It's just kind of a foreign concept to me. And Paul knows, I've been around him plenty. Okay, strangers are not welcome. I just don't do it. But a lot of people do, and a lot of people are good at it, and that's why it takes all kinds. And again, we always kind of bring this back to leadership. You got to recognize that in your own people. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's probably a reason why I'm in the position that I'm in, because the guys hiring me knew who and what I am. Mm-hmm. Right? So I have a couple of direct reports, but I have, kind of a broader overview. And I have a lot of one-on-one time with the director as a confidant and as a consultant to him. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, my transition has been good. I'm very, very fortunate. That's for sure.
Good. Well, we're so grateful to you for your service and for the sacrifice that you have made for your country, for all of us. And I know that, there have been probably many moments for you where it was really difficult for you and for your family. So we so much appreciate it. And it's been so great talking to you. I just have one last question for you before we wrap up, though. Okay. And we just love to ask this question. I'm like compiling notes for everybody. It is this: knowing what you know now, and all your years of service and leadership, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
I think I would probably tell myself to recognize my weaknesses and don't think that the rest of the world needs to conform and understand who I am. I took a long time to learn how to really deal with people. But for a long time, I just honestly didn't care about how I dealt with people or how people thought about how I dealt with people. Mm-hmm. And that caused me, a slowdown in my development as an officer and as a leader. And it was just stubbornness. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I want to say I didn't recognize my weakness, but I think I did. I think I knew what my shortcomings were. I just was stubborn enough to think that everybody else should understand and come along with me.
Right. Adapt to you versus you adapt to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And pretty dumb in retrospect, looking back at it. And I think I could have saved myself a lot of trouble by simply just being honest and saying, look, quit being such a jerk. Go ahead, talk to people, even if it's hard. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And, start letting people get to know you, get a little close to you. It'll all help out in the long run. So nothing you can do about that now except try to pass these lessons down to people who are in those situations now.
That's right.
Be it my kids or be it young leaders that, I have around me today.
Yeah.
And so, I'm always quick to give advice. Just ask my daughter. She'll tell you that I never short of things to tell her how to do things. So.
Yeah.
Albert, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, no, my pleasure, guys. Thank you very much. I hope this was okay, and I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. Heather, do you want to wrap it up?
I'll wrap it up. So we appreciate you. It was just great to get to spend some time with you at more of the professional level, right? Because usually it's more like guys' weekends, right?
Right.
But so appreciative. And thank you all for joining us for the Evolve to Win show. And if you liked this episode, please share it. And you can reach out to us on social media. You can check out our show notes where we'll give you a little bit more information about retired Lieutenant Colonel Al Mategrano. And this was Evolve to Win, produced in partnership with Gulf Shore Business Magazine.
Okay, we can keep it going now because we'll just edit it up. Good job.
Awesome job. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it was really good.
Absolutely awesome.
Okay, I hope I didn't wave my hands around too much. But
No, you didn't at all.
Can't help myself.
Get in here a little bit so I can get a picture of you with Al on your little pod.
Is that going to work? Make sure you send me a copy of that.
Yeah, I will for sure.
So how did it go for you?
Fine by me.
Good.
Yeah, no, fine by me. I just hope, you never know. You kind of cringe. I honestly have never really seen myself talk or speak before. So I don't know if I'm looking forward to or dreading the idea of at some point watching this. But
you'll love it.
You guys have more experience seeing and hearing yourselves. What was it like the first time, huh?
Yeah.
Listen, painful for me, but what's really great is you're so well spoken, and I think it's probably just easier having, such a casual conversation, but I think you'll be pretty impressed with yourself when you watch it back.
Oh, I'm impressed with you guys. I'm so happy for you guys. I'm proud of you both. And, I think what you guys are doing and the risks that you guys are taking are, really something to respect. So I hope you guys do well and wish you guys nothing but continued success and, onwards and upwards for you guys. Right. So if there's ever anything that I can do, please don't hesitate to ask.
Well, thank you so
I
much.
appreciate that.
It means a lot.
Cool.
Okay, guys, if I don't talk to you again, have a great Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, happy Christmas.
Happy
Thanks,
Christmas.
guys.
That's
Okay.
the UK way. All right.
All right, take care.
Al.
All right, see you later. Bye.
Bye.